As mentioned, I'm Luke. I work at Volts. Again, this is not a side project, but still feels like a side project. We don't make any money yet. Um, and I was shipping updates to this up until 2 minutes ago. So it feels like a side project, but if I could do it over again, I'd probably talk about the NFC card reader Sonos thing I built so that my 3-year-old could listen to Imagine Dragons songs on repeat without coming to bug me. So if you want to ask me questions, let's talk about that afterwards. But yeah, this is me. The intro is already done. Worked at NPM, GitHub, a few other places. I'm really into Node, really into open source. Been doing that for too long to count. At NPM, we worked on a lot of stuff. 3 billion downloads a month. I think it was like 4.2 by the end, which was like around 2% of all registry traffic was stuff that we published was being downloaded that much. So a lot of things I'm going to talk about are problems I created. So that's just to give me, a little bit of intro so you know that it's all my fault. But my talk's called Performing Laparoscopic Lockfile Surgery, which was purposefully vague. I don't even think I ever gave Dylan a full description about what the talk was about. It's kind of by design. I figured I kind of wanted to talk about this idea that I actually saw on Twitter once. So someone was saying, I'm doing lockfile surgery, send help. And this idea that we have these lock files on our machine, like what do they do? What are they for? A lot of times you don't notice it until you don't want to. It's way too late. So I was talking to another friend of mine who's like, wait, what's going on? What sort of problems are you having? And he's just like, just bugs. Like all of a sudden, all promises are hanging. The app doesn't work. And it was because he blew away the lock file and reinstalled and was hoping that would clear things up, but it just made things way worse. And that's definitely something I've done before. Just blow away the lock file, reinstall. Hope it works out. Sometimes it does, but when it doesn't, you're kind of left in this state where you're like, what changed? I could do a git diff. It's probably checked into source control. If it's not checked into source control, Command Z. But if it is, even our lock files are huge. Like I mentioned, 15,000 line long lock file. How can you diff that meaningfully? Especially like the order of something changed might not mean it changed the behavior of your app, but like some one number changing from 12.0.1 to 12.0.2 could change your app and you have no idea. So my friend was saying, yeah, try just to never blow away the lock file. It's like, okay, that's one solution, but like that sounds like a lot of work. What happens if it gets into a state where you need to update something? And most of our lock files are not our own dependencies. So JavaScript projects have a lot of dependencies, as we probably all know. And I think that's a really good thing. I've long felt like a JavaScript truther of like, dependencies are good. I think like it's good that we have like is even and is odd. Like it means the system kind of works because people can publish this stuff easily. And I think that's a better alternative than it being really hard for people to publish things and only certain things getting published if they meet a bar. So I think it's good that we have all this stuff. It does make certain things more difficult, like, but there's always trade-offs. So I'm kind of happy with where the JavaScript ecosystem is of like, we have all this stuff on NPM, but what do we do with it? How do we make sense of it all? So obligatory memes, node modules, heaviest in the universe, 15,000 line lock file. That's me in that picture. Giving a talk about lock file. Yeah, just click allow, do whatever you want, software. So the average project has, this is some data we did in 2020, 2021. The average JavaScript project had 683 transitive dependencies. So that's a lot. And those might be like 5. You might have 5 direct dependencies. So imagine like create React app. When you would use that, you'd get a lock file or a package JSON with 5-ish dependencies in it. But behind the scenes, you might have 683 dependencies. And that's not always surfaced to users until it's too late, until you're doing lock file surgery. So this idea of a transitive dependency is something that is a dependency of your project that you depend on, but you don't depend on it directly. So in this example, package A directly depends on package B, which then depends on package C. So project A is your, package A is your project. You're transitively depending on package C. It's not in your package JSON, but it will be in your lock file. So what do you do with all this stuff when you have, 683 package JSONs in your node modules directory for some of these huge mono repos that we might have? npm-ls, or your package manager ls, stands for list, list the dependencies I have. In this case, this is actually the Node Sonos HTTP API that I've been writing. So this has this many direct dependencies. I could have it list more and the full depth of everything, but it's just a static tree view. You could maybe like look for a string in it once, try to find what version it is, maybe look through the rest of the output and see if that version is deduped somewhere else. So you could try to figure out what sort of bugs you're having, if it's depending on, maybe a version of ESLint that I have in my project. You can use grep, everyone's favorite developer tool, or everyone's favorite last resort. So here's me like grepping for React in, which project was this? This was a remix web app we have at work. So it's cool to see on a movie theater screen how many times React, and it's just not super granular. You can see I have, things where it lists actual versions of React, things where it lists radix dependencies on React, plugins, UI plugins. I can't even really see this on my screen, but it's a lot. There's a lot of things in there that depend on React or are React or are associated with React in some way. So grep, not a great tool for this. And this is also an NPM project. So the lock file is JSON, and which also doesn't lend itself great to grep because a lot of stuff is repeated all throughout the lock file. So as I mentioned before, I work at a company called Volt, so not a side project, but we have our own lock file. Everyone has their own lock file now. You could have npm, pnpm, Dino, Bun, Volt, Yarn. I think that's all of them that people in this room would probably use. So our lock file is a little different. We've optimized the lock file a little bit for readability, but it's still not great. So in this one, I'm grepping for React 19 with, like, if you can see here, like a little tiny dot there. And that dot is our like kind of separator selector for a list of dependencies. So if you have that there, it's like, that means it's one of your, or it's like it's a direct dependency that you have somewhere. So in this case, React 19 is a dependency of all of these, plugins, React Bootstrap, React Aria, Restart hooks. So it's there. You can read it a little bit easier, but I'm using grep all the time for this stuff before, and it's still not great. It kind of gives you an idea, a high level idea of like if it's in there, and then but what do you do with that information? So there's hope. So we want to make a better tool for kind of looking at this stuff and looking at your node modules and making it a little bit easier for developers to have visibility into their introspection into your lock file. Because if you just ignore it, you're going to end up like the first tweet that I showed, where all of a sudden you're going to be doing lock file surgery in over your head with a very blunt tool. Grep is not a good surgical tool. It's very, very blunt. You don't want to be doing surgery with grep. You don't want to be just bashing something until it works. So one tool we've come up with is we're calling dependency selectors. So DSS for short, dependency selector syntax. It's kind of like a string, a dependency selector that you use to query the state of your current node modules or lock file. So you can ask a bunch of questions about this about the data in there. Currently, we're just supporting like what's actually in the package JSON, but we have plans for arbitrary data, that metadata that you could add to your node modules directory and associate with a package, and then be able to get that data back. So let me show some examples of what's possible. So it looks a lot like CSS. If you've avoided CSS for your whole career, I'm sorry. It's going to look like that, but it allows you. We have pseudo selectors, or we have a star, which is going to show everything. We have pseudo selectors that we're calling that are like pre-named things that we know you're going to need. Root, :project is for workspaces. You could have dot selectors, which are, I think this is actually slightly out of date. As I said, we're pushing changes this morning. Dot selectors are for dependency types like prod, dev, peer, the type of a dependency. And then you can select based on arbitrary metadata in a package JSON. So look for something with that name. We're using the hash to mean the name, so you don't have to like always do the attribute selector. So if you do hash Lodash, that means show me everything with the name of Lodash. So that one's just a shorthand. And then you can chain these things. So you can say, show me everything with the name of Lodash where the version contains 1.2, or the tilde is contains 1.2. You could do a caret and have it be starts with 1.2. And then a few more here. So we do have a not pseudo selector, so you can get really complicated, as you can imagine, with this stuff, where you could say, show me something with an attribute that also does not have this other attribute, and do a subset of something. So already you can see a little bit more powerful than grep for looking directly into our Lockfile and our node modules and seeing what's there. So here's a few more examples of attribute selectors. So we have show me the license of everything with MIT or ISC, and the comma is the same as CSS, like a combinator selector. You could show me everything with a node engines property. Show me everything, find all dependencies that have defined React as an optional peer, which is, if you're in the React ecosystem, a lot of times you'll have, you need to have one version of React, because that's how React has defined that it works. It needs to be the only one there. So dependencies will say, I might need React, and if I do, it needs to be this version. So that way you can look through all your dependencies and say, show me versions that might need React, and if they do, have an optional dependency on it. This one I call it's your problem now selector. So find dependencies where I'm a contributor to it, to where if I look there and there's a bug, then it's my fault and I need to go fix it. And then everyone's favorite, show me if it has a post install script. Show me if I'm about to get owned by installing it. So this works on the command line. We have Volt query, pass in an arbitrary selector, and it'll give you back JSON. So then you can pipe it to JQ and kind of see all of this in JSON format, and then save it to disk, look through it. You have a little bit. It's a way to query this stuff without needing to look into the lock file directly, but you get the data out of it that you can hopefully parse a little bit easier. But in the end, it's all still text. Like, you're just going to end up, this is going to end up with a command line output of, the name and version of everything that is React, or any arbitrary query that we put here. So we also have programmatic usage. We have some workspaces that we consume that are basically doing the same thing. It's a thin wrapper. The CLI is a thin wrapper around basically this, where you search for a query and you get all those nodes back as its output. So it's, instead of it being just JSON on the command line, it's going to be in your code, and you can do whatever you want with it. But still, like, there's got to be something a little bit better. Like, we have all this amazing technology that I've talked about, all these amazing dependencies that we have. Like, can we build something where we could actually look at this stuff a little bit easier? So we built a GUI too, which I'm really excited about. That's my favorite part of what we have so far. And so I'm going to do some demoing of this, some live demoing. Always works really well. Where did my browser go? Ooh. I thought I had it in the same tab, but I don't. All right, so we'll bring up this one. This is our GUI. If you want to see how this is being run, this is, I'll bring up my editor as well, just so you can see like the dirty behind the scenes, how it's actually working. So this is just a directory with a lot of dependencies in it. So I'm treating this as like my projects directory on your computer, where you're working on 15 different projects across, different stacks, different teams at work. Some of them are personal, some are work projects. Just for fun, I checked, and it's 16 gigabytes of node modules. Like, there's literally no source code in here. It's package JSON and node modules. So 16 gigabytes of other people's code on my computer. How do I know like which of this is running in which app? So I Volt installed in all of these before, so I won't put us through that, because I think I'm still tethered to my phone, which is in my pocket, to make sure this was working. So, and then the first thing I do in the project is run Volt GUI. Since I'm inside this project, I set the what we call the dashboard root as this project. So in other cases, it can show you like more things on your machine, maybe everything in your projects directory, or just a subset. So I'm going to run Volt GUI. And it spins up a web server. It looked through my disk for everything in these projects, saved it in a representation that the browser can load, in this case, JSON. And now I can click through and kind of see everything. So this is an exact replica of the Volt package monorepo. It starts by just showing you the package JSON of what you're looking into. But then over here is going to be all of my direct dependencies. And if I want to see everything that's there, I'll type star and see I have a total of 2,635 different dependencies in this project. So that's a lot. I could just, this is basically grep. I can just scroll through, I could Command F and look through stuff. But let me scroll back to the top. We have the search bar, which takes the dependency selector syntax I was talking about. And because I'm horrible at live demos, I pre-populated some queries, which I typed in before and just saved into my sidebar, so you didn't have to watch me remember how to spell React. So in this case, I'm going to click dev-dep. .dev is, now I'm only at 722 dependencies. So of the 2,365, 722 are dev dependencies. We use a lot of ESLint for linting, so I'm going to look for actual versions of ESLint in this project. And so this selector is looking for anything with a name of ESLint or ESLint's new top level package in version 9, ESLint/JS, the scoped package. And so this is important because you can see I have 3 different versions of ESLint in this, or 2 different versions of ESLint in this project. This is missing, which could be a bug, or could be it's telling me something helpful about this project. Like I said, I was installing these from tethered to my phone before, so something could actually be missing. But in this case, it's showing me that of all the workspaces we have, there's 32 of them. We have 32 different versions, so like different versions on disk, but they all resolve to the same thing. So I actually only have one resolved version of ESLint 9.19.0, which is good. ESLint is another dependency where it needs to kind of have only one version if you're going to be running it from a project, because it's loading a bunch of plugins. The second you have 2 different versions of it, those plugins might be talking to different versions of ESLint, in which case you're going to get a helpful error saying, try to only use one version of ESLint. But how do you, if you get in that case, you're just going to be looking through your node modules and saying, how did I get here? How did I get to 2 versions of ESLint? I don't actually know. So you can click through in these cases and see everything. In this case, it's going to now show me like the actual list of all the paths on disk for versions of ESLint. And then if I click one, I get this helpful view of like the actual ESLint package JSON in the node modules. Everything it depends on, but more importantly, everything that is bringing that version of ESLint in. So I can look through and see that pretty much every workspace I'm working on uses that version of ESLint, this is an optimal case. We have set up our monorepo in a way to make sure we don't have multiple versions of ESLint. But let's say you have, let's say that's not the case. Let's say you're using two different Next apps. So this is a demo I made to pretend like you're on a team and you have a legacy Next app and a new Next app, or maybe two different teams are working on it, two Next apps, but they're in the same monorepo. So if you have Next 14 and Next 15 side by side, how do you know like what version of ESLint it is? So in this case, I can use the same saved query, and I can see that Next app 15 needs ESLint 9, and Next app 14 needs ESLint 8. So I am going to have two different versions of ESLint in this case, which could be okay. Depends on the usage within the monorepo. It could be okay if like they're separate, but if they're trying to share that tooling in some way, like if someone's going to make a new workspace that's a new ESLint plugin or something, they're going to have to make it work with 8 and 9. If they make it only work with 9, it's not going to work within the ESLint 8 version. So in that case, we had two Next apps. What if we had three Next apps? Just kidding, this one has 6. I was just installing different versions of Next until it wouldn't let me anymore. So in this case, I was like, that's this last example taken to an even more extreme. I don't know if this is a real world use case, 6 different versions of Next projects in one repo. But you can imagine cases where you are going to have projects using a lot of different versions of the same dependency. So in this case, I'm going to look at this pre-populated query, just show me versions of Next. And so you can see I ended up with Next 10.2.3, 11.1.4, and so on. So I have one different major version from 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, which is actually good. In this case, each one of those projects was supposed to bring in its own version of Next, and they should be different. But Next is a React framework, so that's also going to bring in different versions of React. So we can look at this selector, which again, thankfully I did not need to type out, where we're looking for something with the name of Next or something with React that depends directly on something with the name of Next. So we can see that from those 6 versions of Next, we only end up with 3 React versions, because we can see that this is too small, my computer. The 10 and 11 version of Next can use the same version of, I'm gonna go back to this, can use the same version of React. So they both end up with React 17. The 12, 13, and 14 all end up with React 18, even though this one can, even though Next 12 says I can use React 17 or 18, but we know it's going to end up with 18 and it's going to share it with these two. So if, for example, I'm running into a bug in my Next 13 app where I need to update React, I'm going to know that it's going to change the version of React installed here as well. So I should make sure that it's 1, compatible with it, and 2, like, I'm going to run the test for this afterwards, because they're connected in that way. And then this one we can see ends up with a version of React 19, the latest version, which was just released a few weeks ago, I think. And if you end up on a selected page with just one package, we end up with this nice view that shows the name, the version. We fetch the description and how many downloads it gets, so who it was published by, so you can kind of see a little bit more live data from what's in your dependencies. And this is what I was talking about before. We plan on adding more of this, but this is the package JSON is what's on disk, but this is like arbitrary metadata that we're going and fetching from known sources, like because we can see that you downloaded it from NPM, so we're going to get the weekly downloads from NPM. Let's go back to the dashboard and see what else we have. So I tried to come up with a bunch of convoluted-ish examples, but not too convoluted. Like something you would definitely see if you've been doing this for a while, but you're not going to see every day. But when you do, you're going to be really thankful that you don't have to grep through these lock files. So this is a now defunct bracket challenge website that I ran myself for a decade, speaking of side projects. And I think I built this in like Node 6 at the time. Yeah, or Node NPM 6, Node 14. So pretty old, but I installed everything with Volt and it worked fine. But what I really wanted to know is if it can use node 22, and not a great sign that nothing in my package, nothing in my node modules at all says I work with node 22. It might, but not a great sign. So I'm going to, try to update straight away to node 22. Like I'm probably going to have a lot of work to do. But if I look at node 6, like, okay, this is why like it used, this is why node 6 is, it's still compatible with all these like very base level libraries that are not dropping support for things like Babel, well, old versions of Babel, I should say. And if you can see, this selector again is using the dependency selector syntax. So I'm saying, look at my package JSON, look for the engine's attribute, and then anything where the key of node within that engine's object contains 6. Which is not a perfect way to map this stuff. We're planning on adding a semver selector that's actually going to do the semver for you, because looking for 6 within, it's actually tokenizing it on spaces and then looking for something with 6. So it's a little bit better, but we should still do the full semver parsing, because semver can get wild. We actually have our own semver parser that we wrote in TypeScript that you can use if you are also like us and wish that semver was written in TypeScript. Which again is my fault. I could have changed that. I didn't. Actually, there's one more example I wanted to show from this one. Was oh yeah, it's your problem. So this is my project. I wrote my own HTML tagged literals library, like for some reason, and I can see that it's using it, and I'm the author of it. So it was also using a few, like my own ESLint config, and then I wrote all this code to render and parse NCAA brackets, like we all do in our free time. Let's see. I was also going to show the let's see. Oh wait, yeah, it was in Volt package. So we use TypeScript for all of our stuff. Like I said, I have like a bunch of selectors or a bunch of saved queries here. So I wanted to see what version of TypeScript we're running, because as we know, TypeScript does not follow semver. So we've pinned TypeScript in a bunch of places, and so we can see that I have actually 5 different versions of TypeScript here. 10 of my workspaces are 5.5.3, 8 are 5.7.2, 8 are 5.5.2, and then this is actually a bug that's not showing the version here, but we can see this is 5.5.4. So TypeScript doesn't follow semver, so we've pinned it, but we've gotten in this case where we have 5 different versions of TypeScript, which is not great. So there's going to be work to do to like clean those up, but at least by clicking through, I can see 5.7.3. It's coming from all of these workspaces. So I can start here and look in the benchmarks workspace, the run workspace, the check workspace, or that's not our workspace, that's the Astro check. I had a bunch more examples. I kind of just wrote them until I had thought of every idea I could, to like all, whatever years of my career were dumped into random package JSONs. But there's more. So if you do want to talk about this stuff, I will talk to you about it as well, but also NFC cards and Sonos. And you can use this today. You can npm install Volt. npm still a great way to install stuff. So you can install it globally and run this in any of your projects. If you run Volt install, it will overwrite your node modules, but you can reinstall with something else. But the GUI works best right now with a new node modules directory. And so yeah, that's the demo. And then please file a bug once you use it, because I just ran into like 10. So I'm sure you will run into some as well. Thank you.